Welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, what if I told you there's an abandoned nuclear facility out there where the emergency alarm still sounds, even though the power was literally shut off decades ago? Pretty crazy, right? Today, we're diving into the incredibly chilling lore of the reactor that never went silent. This is a fascinating piece of fiction, heavily inspired by some very real and very eerie Cold War history.
Seriously, I want you to imagine the sheer impossibility of that scenario for a second. You are standing in a massive, completely dead facility. The power grid has been severed for years, maybe even decades. There's absolutely no electricity anywhere. And then suddenly, deafening sirens start blaring. I mean, how does your brain even begin to process something so entirely illogical?
Section 1. Official Truth versus Local Lore. The Cold War Reactor.
So to set the scene, back during the Cold War, there was this remote research reactor operating deep inside a heavily guarded forest. Now, if you look at the official records, they'll tell you it was permanently shut down after a small, manageable radiation incident forced an evacuation. End of story, right? Well, local workers told a vastly different story. They claimed that night shift started hearing actual voices coming over the facility's intercom system just after midnight. And the absolute strangest part of all this, the voices supposedly belonged to engineers who had died in that very facility years earlier.
Section 2. The Midnight Investigation. One guard's descent.
Well, as the story goes, one security guard finally decided he was going to test his courage and find the true source of these impossible voices. So, step by step, he follows the sound. He's navigating through these pitch-black, abandoned corridors entirely alone, with just his flashlight cutting through the dark. Finally, he reaches the very end of the line, stepping into the old, dead reactor control room.
And what does he find? Nothing. The monitors were completely dead. The lights were off. There was zero power flowing to any of the equipment in this massive concrete tomb. He was standing there in total, absolute silence.
Section 3. The Blue Light Encounter. The reactor wakes up.
But then, that silence completely shatters. The Geiger counter clipped to his belt just starts clicking, faster and faster. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, every single emergency siren in the dead building roars to life. Driven by sheer terror and totally convinced that the reactor had somehow miraculously restarted on its own, the guard completely books it. He runs outside into the cold night as fast as he can.
But when he finally stops and looks back at the building, he sees that the control room windows are glowing with this eerie, intense blue light. And for just a brief moment, he sees several figures wearing vintage, old-school protective suits just standing there silently behind the thick glass. They don't move. They simply watch him.
Section 4. An enduring legend. The aftermath.
Obviously, he calls for backup, right? But when the rescue team arrives mere minutes later, the building is completely dark again. They sweep the area and find absolutely no radiation spike, no electricity running through the grids. In fact, there was no sign whatsoever that those massive mechanical sirens had ever even sounded.
They found literally zero evidence, zero radiation, zero power. The building was completely dormant the entire time. And you know, that total lack of proof was so deeply unsettling that the terrified guard resigned the very next day. He packed up his entire life and vowed to remain absolutely silent about what he saw behind that glass.
So what does this all leave us with today? Well, to this day, modern explorers say that if you happen to stand outside that abandoned reactor just after midnight, you might still hear a Geiger counter clicking away in the darkness. The only problem is, there's no one there holding it. Makes you wonder what really still haunts that force, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me for today's Explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.